A city reveals its truths and its history through the things that you can see. It's like we live in the present, but there's a constant layering of evidence from the past, and you can read things from that. And I first got interested in North Hartford when I was an exhibit developer at Wadsworth Atheneum, and got involved in the 1980s in a $1 million restoration of the ancient burying ground, which is right across the street from the Wadsworth Atheneum. It's down across next to Center Church. So it didn't take long before I started poking around the North End and was blown away by Old North Cemetery, how much there was there. And I started looking around this, relatively poor neighborhood, a place that doesn't usually command the kind of respect and attention that it could. And I was just fascinated by everything I found. And the clock tower, just to look at that site, you've got these major roads, the major road to Albany, Main Street, High Street, Ann Street. They all converge right there. So you can see that this was and still is a very prominent gateway to the entrance of the city. And the way it's arranged and the presence of the clock tower right there tells you the powers that be, City Hall, the business community, the philanthropists, regarded that as an extremely important place, a place that would be an economic hub, a transportation hub, and a source of civic pride. It was built in 1898. Henry and Walter Keeney were business tycoons. They made a lot of money, and they became benefactors. Keeney Park, of course, is the most famous thing. And we actually built this clock tower there deliberately because of the importance of the location as a memorial to their mother. And it's based on a 14th century French cathedral. So it's an architectural, it's one of the prides of Hartford, and a beautiful thing. And you look at that, and then you sort of look around and you say, well, they knocked down all these buildings around it. They're parking lots. And you've got the Capitol Prep next door. Then in the late 1990s, I was the director of the Connecticut Landmarks, a group of historic properties all over the state of Connecticut. One of their properties is the Isham-Terry house. I was kind of blown away by it. There's kind of an amazing story. I mean, look, Mark Twain and Harriet Beecher Stowe are much more famous, but I prefer this house to any other because it's loaded with
Let's look at the interior. Can we see the interior of that?
It's so pretty breathtaking. Oh, man. And everything in that house belonged to the family. It's not a restoration. This is how that family lived, and it's all their possessions. And it's loaded with what I call Hartfordisms, things that reflect the family's connectivity to that neighborhood, which they cherished. I mean, the daughters went to Hartford High. Back in their time, in the 1900s, you could walk. That's Charlotte Isham. You could walk from that house to Hartford High School.
Yeah.
So the doctor, their brother, Dr. Isham, had his medical office there. That's him.
Oh, okay.
And he was a neighborhood doctor. And so what was the neighborhood? Yeah, Clay Hill, the old North neighborhood, right that we're talking about there. And his patients were people who lived there. Now, if you go back to 1910 and you say, well, who lived there? There were African Americans there, of course, and there were Irish and Italians, and it was the center of the Jewish community at the time, almost like Brooklyn, New York, and being extremely diverse. And the Jewish educators, they created one of the most successful multicultural curriculums in the country. And what they specialized in, Charles, was helping immigrants who had English as a second language transition themselves into American citizens and to be successful in their new adopted country. And like half the residents of that neighborhood 100 years ago had English as a second language. Well, there are a lot of people for whom that is still true there. Yep. And the minute the redlining stopped, the minute the Jews could leave, many of them did, and many things, urban renewal, The exodus to the suburbs, a lot of things changed that neighborhood after 1965. So that by 1980, it was poor. It was sort of hollowed out economically.
Mm-hmm.
The jobs left, the industries left, and the people with money left, including African American people with money who left.
Yes.
And so where are we now? We've got a place that still matters. For me, history, local history, is a gateway to inclusion. Once you know the story of the place you live, you have a quality of attachment and connectivity to that place that is empowering. That what we've got there, this is Hartford's most historic neighborhood, and what we've got there is a gold mine. And the Keeney Clock Tower and the Isham House and the graveyards, it's not just about tourism, though it could certainly be about that. It's also about civic pride.
They had this project called the I Quilt Project. When we found out about this organization, we were asking, well, why wasn't the Isham-Terry House, the Clock Towers, and Old North Cemetery included in this I Quilts planning? And so that's part of the exclusion. It's kind of like a little redlining.
Yeah, it's a kind of cultural redlining.
Because, once you sit here in a very poor neighborhood and you wait for public funding, sometimes it really never comes.
You can't really love another person if you don't know them. I mean, that's obvious. To be in a loving relationship with anything, whether it's another person, with God, or with your neighborhood, you have to know about it. This history could be a springboard for giving people a stronger, more confident sense of civic pride and local pride. If I had a magic wand, Capital Prep, Sand School, the schools there, Robkins Library, Robkins Branch, Hartford Public Library, would embrace all these wonderful treasures.
We're kind of embracing this concept of intergenerational relationships where the seniors can learn from the youth and the youth can learn from the seniors.
Love that. We had a youth training program at Ancient Burying Ground on Main Street that assured that the young people that were giving tours there actually knew what was there and had the skills and the training to be effective at the job of being a tour guide. And look, Hartford has an abundance of cultural riches and art. And we've got these national treasures like the Wadsworth Athenaeum and the Bushnell and lots of good stuff. That's one of the things Hartford has. But a lot of that great stuff is in this poorest neighborhood. It's never gotten the respect or the attention it deserves. Thanks to you. And the city of Hartford, City Hall, did invest unprecedented amounts of money in
just recently.
Recently.